Welcome in, everybody, to Fantasy Pros. This is the Fantasy Football Podcast. It is me, Joey P, Joe Pizzapia, and today it's about buying low, selling high. You know all those good things. And today, Andrew Erickson, of course, going to help us do all those things for Week 6 in the NFL, and so will our guest, straight from in this league, the ITL master himself. We also know him from Fantasy Pros as my co-host of the MLB show. Leading off, it's the Welsh. Yay, the Welsh on a football show. I love the crossover potential here. And Welsh, let's just kick off right with you. Leonard Fournette, are you buying, selling, or holding, especially with the recent emergence of Rachaad White a little bit working in the receiving game?
I kind of want to dance around both sides of it to be like, maybe I'm holding. I don't think you can sell. I don't think it's a great time. I don't know if I'd want to go out there buying. So this kind of feels like a player that I'm going to sit tight with. I have a hard time believing that regardless of Rachaad White's increased usage and whatever that's going to be, that Leonard Fournette is going to be completely phased out. So the unfortunate side is I don't think White ever really becomes as valuable unless Fournette gets hurt. I don't know if Fournette is taken enough away simply because he's probably one of those guys, maybe in a James Conner-ish type of role, that's going to continue to be able to get those touchdowns. I think I'm holding tight, but if you put a gun to my head as far as which side I'm going to go with, maybe I would go with the buy because it's not super pretty right now. I just don't think selling is going to be advantageous to any fantasy owner right now on the cost that you had on that offense that has not started clicking.
I think he's one of the more divisive assets right now in fantasy football. I think there's some people that might have him and undervalue him, some people that might want him and overvalue him, and then some people who have Rachaad White who, are just kind of waiting, sitting in the weeds, hoping that they get Leonard Fournette maybe to not play as much down the stretch and Rachaad White pop off. But I think he's kind of a hold personally myself too. Yeah. It feels like more eye of the beholder than any other player. And when we have those kind of situations, you know what we like to do here on the show. I like to press everybody also to see if I can tempt them with a trade. So Andrew Erickson, let's talk more Leonard Fournette here. So Lenny Fournette, proven entity. We know what he is. We know what the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are. For the rest of the season, would you rather have old man Fournette or that young buck, your boy, Breece Hall of the New York Jets?
See, when you ask the question like that, rest of the season, the Jets have such a juicy playoff schedule. I lean towards the Breece Hall side. I like going towards the younger running back, whereas with Fournette, we've seen him break down towards the end of the season. So who can I say is going to be in more championship winning lineups? It's probably going to be Breece Hall. Like, Leonard Fournette might be the guy that gets you there, which is obviously important. But Breece Hall, I think, is going to deliver fantasy football championships this year. We talked about him on every single buy low show that we've had this season, and the takeover was full effect last week.
Yeah.
He almost had 200 yards from scrimmage, almost 100 rushing yards and receiving yards, like absolutely bonkers. And Michael Carter is still stealing touchdowns. Like, Breece Hall hasn't even reached his final form yet. And so for me, if I had to trade Leonard Fournette, and that's the only thing I could do to get Breece Hall on my team, I would do it. Ideally, I think that Fournette's value should be higher than Breece Hall, so I think that you should be able to get something back, so Breece Hall plus. But if the Breece Hall manager is like gun-ho, like I want Fournette, I'm trading Fournette.
Yeah, it's fascinating because you're right, Harrison. I feel like every single week we've talked about Breece Hall as the buy low. We can't do it anymore. It's over. It's done. He has moved, though, from 13 points, 12 points, 15 points, 27 points in half PPR. Welsh, we've seen what he's been doing in the passing game. You've seen that. You've also seen what he's been doing, too, in terms of volume. It's gone from 8 carries to 17 to 18 the last few weeks. As Andrew Erickson also mentioned there, Welsh, this is a good playoff schedule, but you got to get to the playoffs first. So who do you trust to get you there and then get you that championship? Is it Hall or is it Fournette?
You just started off with like, hey, we kind of like Leonard Fournette. This might be a fun thing. We're both holding. I'm going to go with Breece Hall, too. I mean, you're putting out a player. Breece Hall.
Well, that didn't last very long, did it?
One thing here about him as well, he has the most red zone targets of any running back right now. And think of his workload that he's adding. And that's on the receiving side. I just want to point out, like on the receiving side, he's already got 7 red zone targets that he's putting up. And think of like the first couple weeks when he wasn't in. Now you're seeing the increased snap percentage. You're seeing the increased workload that he had this week. He also looks incredible between the tackles. And like Erickson said, Michael Carter's stealing some of that value away, and he is absolutely explosive. Breece Hall is one of my favorite players right now. He plays both sides of the ball well. The Jets are probably going to be playing from behind a whole lot, and he is so involved in that passing game. when they're in the red zone, they're going to go to Breece Hall. They're going to go as far as running. Michael Carter might steal a couple from it, but this is the situation that you put together that I don't want to say it's like so cut and clear, but I would try to push for a little bit more. But if the guy's like, hey, listen, I'm just going to do Fournette for Breece, push comes to shove, I'm doing it. I'm going to trade Fournette to get Breece Hall, even if I can't get a little bit more, because that's a guy that I want to go to battle with through the rest of the season, even though he's got a more worry complement back than Fournette does in Rachaad White and a better offense there. Breece Hall's the talent that I want to bet on.
Yesterday on the waiver wire pod, Debra and I were talking about the recent trend, all right, the last couple of years where we have these younger running backs figuring it out and having big second halves. A couple of years ago, David Montgomery, J.K. Dobbins, DeAndre Swift, Jonathan Taylor. It goes on and on and on that list, it feels like, the last few years, and it feels like this could be another spot here, and I'm going to give you another one of those guys, Dameon Pierce, who a lot of folks were very high on. First couple of weeks were a little shaky, but after that, my man has righted the ship. He has finished in half PPR as RB10, RB6, RB12 last few weeks. He is off this week after a huge win. They just said, you know what, Houston Texans, go take a week off. You earned it. You got a W. But who would you rather have, Welsh, rest of the season? Dameon Pierce of the Houston Texans or Leonard Fournette of the Tampa Bay Bucks?
Man, you started me with this one too. Give me the Breece one to start with. I find this really difficult because when you get into the game of workhorses, Dameon Pierce is one of the few becoming workhorses on any team right now. He's scored in the top 10 half PPR. He's a top 10 scoring back. He's actually number 9. Fournette, though, as far as points per game, is number 6, and he's kind of underperformed. So you could really make a big argument for underperforming Fournette still being near the top there is a big positive. Push comes to shove, I think I'm going to kind of go back to that wheel, like I said, with Breece Hall. I'm going to go with Dameon Pierce. I'm a little bit worried about the Texans offense being able to maintain into games, but you're also seeing Pierce a little bit more involved in the pass game. And something that they're realizing is if they're not going to have the run game going, which really all teams should do, the Colts should have been doing very early on in the year, is if you can't get the ball in the hands of your best player, as far as rushing goes, then throw some screen passes, let them get involved into open space. And that's something I think the Texans will continue to do with Dameon Pierce. And he's just a pure workhorse. That is the gimme here. I'm a little bit worried about just how Brady has played in general. The Bucs offense has opportunities to get going. This week might be another opportunity for that.
Certainly feels like it.
But you've got just increased workload as far as the running backs go. I know Fournette's going to keep going. I just want workhorses. I think that's what I'm moving towards more. So I don't know if I would bend quite like I would with Breece Hall. I probably would want a tiny bit more, but I just don't know if you could put it together. But I am going to go with Dameon Pierce, and I literally said I'm going to hold, and both of your trades, I'm moving Fournette.
Well, I found the right guys. That's the whole thing.
You did.
This is something people should think about, too. These are younger backs. We're talking about the workload going in their favor. Andrew Erickson, I know neither of these offenses, the Jets nor the Houston Texans, are necessarily the top of the league, but would you rather have Fournette or Pierce rest of season? Which guy would you want back in a trade?
I think this one I'm going to go back to the veteran here with Leonard Fournette. I think that the Jets offense versus I think the Jets offense is much better than the Texans offense. So I know you kind of group them together, but Davis Mills is horrible. Like, he is so bad, and he's played much worse than the quarterbacks from the Jets have played this season. So I think that's
matters.
Really
saying something.
It's a good point.
And I mean, besides Dameon Pierce, like, who's moved? Like, what scares other defenses? Brandon Cooks, like, he's really slowed down significantly. Nico Collins is starting to get targets and more involvement. But so I think that there's a smaller floor with Dameon Pierce, or where he could kind of flame out at points if the offense doesn't get going. And I mean, we got to still give credit to Fournette. I mean, he had 24 touches last week. He had 11 targets. Like, he led the Buccaneers in targets last week because Brady doesn't want to get hit. And look, Chris Godwin, how healthy is Chris Godwin? Like, they didn't even play him barely in the second half of the game because they had a lead. They were up by 3 touchdowns. And then, what do you know? The Falcons came back. Like, so they're still proceeding cautiously with Chris Godwin. And right now, Leonard Fournette is still someone that they're featuring in the passing game so heavily. Like, Brady trusts Leonard Fournette. So I know that Rachaad White has taken on a little bit of a bigger role, but even in the last 2 weeks, like, Fournette still is seeing a lot of volume and is getting touchdowns. So I think Breece Hall, I said I would take over Fournette, but in this case, I think I'm going to go back to Fournette.
Just want to point one thing out, too, with Dameon Pierce. I didn't mean to jump on it, but it's just like, it's hard to jump away when you see 31 perceived touches. They had 5 targets in the passing game this past week, 26 carries, and 3 straight weeks of 20-plus perceived touches. It's really, really difficult in this space of not having workhorse backs, I think, to like look past it. But I do agree, like, Leonard Fournette is in an offense that is just so exponentially better than the Texans. I actually think those guys are like almost 1A, 1B as far as you could go either side on it, but I wouldn't blame Fournette or Pierce. But man, 31 perceived touches. Gimme.
I would venture to say, with both in most casual leagues, the name brand value of Fournette will probably give you one of these running backs plus. I think you can get an ancillary receiver with Dameon Pierce for Fournette. And if you need some bodies, need some help, I think you could probably do the same thing with Breece Hall. Just putting it out there. It's still, I think the perception of Leonard Fournette and the Bucs is probably just a bit high enough where you could probably still pull off that deal. Now, these are some deals we're talking about. And if you need more help with your deals, well, I've got a deal for you. That's right. You go to fantasypros.com/myplaybook and you can use Trade Analyzer. The Trade Analyzer and Trade Finder tools are the best resources out there for those active fantasy managers who are looking to improve their rosters constantly. And this is trade season. Bye weeks is trade season. This is the best time to use this tool. And I'm telling you right now, maybe your season hasn't gotten off to the right start. You're somebody who hangs out here every single day, watches the shows, listens to the pods, but you haven't already gone premium. Well, this is your chance. There's still plenty of time, plenty of tools for you. fantasypros.com/offers. That's where you go to upgrade. And then you can use that once you make a deposit, one of our partner sites, you get 6 free months of the Fantasy Pros premium product. Then you can use that trade analyzer, trade finder over at fantasypros.com/myplaybook or download the My Playbook app as well. Let's get to another RB here to discuss. And let's talk about the next guy on Sleeper that's been traded a whole lot these last few weeks. And that is James Robinson. So tell me right now, Andrew Erickson, with some of the recent movement a little bit towards Travis Etienne, are you buying, selling, or holding J-Rob?
Probably going to hold James Robinson. I mean, he's still a running back that, look, when the Jacksonville Jaguars were winning games, like he was the featured guy. And the fact that they've lost these back-to-back weeks and he has sucked in those weeks, well, that kind of tells you the story here. When Jacksonville plays well, it's because of James Robinson in the positive game scripts that they've had in those situations. But when they've been losing and not playing well, James Robinson hasn't been nearly as involved. So I don't think it makes sense to sell low, especially with a guy like James Robinson who you drafted later on in drafts anyway. Like James Robinson is really, I don't think you've ever been able to really sell at any point this year to get I got a haul for James Robinson, because no one thought he was even going to be the starter at all. So you've basically kind of been playing with house money if you drafted James Robinson. So I think that he's still a hold. You know, there are injuries can happen, and you know that, look, he can be a top 10 running back. He's done it 3 times already this season. Like, I don't want to necessarily get rid of those guys. Like, I got to get rid of this player off my team. I don't see it that way.
Well, there's been injuries. There's been underperformance too. Guys like Najee Harris. We just heard a little bit about Jalen Warren getting a little bit more work too. We just heard that today from Mike Tomlin. So there are some opportunities here to maybe move James Robinson. Do you want to do that, Welsh? Do you want to hold? Do you want to buy? What do you want to do?
I think Andrew actually said the most important thing on there. Like, I would want to if it were possible, but as he said, I just don't think there is this real opportunity. I just don't know that the value sits out there. You talk about like, hey, the script is when the Jaguars play great, he's going to be involved. Well, that kind of helps answer some questions because the Jaguars not necessarily playing super great every single week. So that has more opportunity for Etienne. But I just don't know that James Robinson holds the value. You, Mr. Joe Pisapia, are going to let us know what some trades on Sleeper are looking like. That might change my mind, but I'm not convinced that the risk of whatever you would acquire is worth moving off of him just in case. Etienne is not the pillar of health. James Robinson can be an absolute feature back. I think it's trending in a different direction, but I'm probably going to hold unless the right trade comes. And boy, I kind of think you might bring the trades that I would do.
Well, let's see. James Robinson right now in half PPR is RB15 on the year. Would you trade the flavor of the month right now, or should I say of the week, Ken Walker, who everyone's emptying the fab clip for, Welsh, or would you rather have James Robinson? So Walker or Robinson, who would you rather have rest of season?
I'm going to go with Walker. I mean, this is a pretty easy one for me. When we get into our next segment, you're going to probably understand even a little bit more why. I like what James Robinson can do, and the regime seems to want to get him involved, but it's trending, I think, in a little bit of a different direction over the last couple weeks. And Etienne is your future. If I can get Ken Walker right now, who you don't want to go out and say that he's going to be the absolute feature back, but because they got DJ Dallas and they've got Travis Homer, who'll be coming back at some point. But for all intents and purposes, he's going to get the go. And he's a big explosive back. I think he was 7 for 19 or 7 for 17 without the big breakout play. And then he had the big one, which ended up getting him 8 for 88 yards and an obvious big rush per attempt. So I want Walker in what could be a workhorse workhorse type load for this team. Even if they involve DJ Dallas, I think it would push up to somewhere between 15 and 18 touches. And I'll take that, especially with how Geno Smith has been working with this Seattle offense, and as far as he's been efficient in completions, I'll take that versus what I want out of Jacksonville and a running back that is in, at worst or at best, if you want to call it, a full complete split with I think a more talented back. So I'm going to go with Ken Walker, who has the opportunity to be the feature back in Seattle than a share in Jacksonville.
All right, Erickson, how about you? Ken Walker, fresh off the waiver wire or fresh from the bench, or James Robinson? Because there is that thought process. Well, Walker's value might never be higher than it is right now. And I know the matchups are pretty good. You got Arizona a couple times. You get New York Giants. You get the Chargers here coming up in a few weeks. Lots of good matches here for Ken Walker. Are you going to take those matchups, or are you going to take the guy who you said he's been an RB1 every time he's been out there last two seasons?
Well, the Chargers don't stop the run, so his value is going to be higher after he plays the
Don't
Chargers.
even play the run.
I can guarantee that
at this point.
I'm going with Ken Walker here. I mean, this was the play all along by drafting Ken Walker in the later rounds. Rashad Penny will be the bell cow until he gets hurt, and unfortunately that ended up happening for Rashad Penny. And that's why the Seahawks drafted Ken Walker, because they knew that Rashad Penny wasn't going to be necessarily take on the entire workload for the entire season. And Ken Walker, we talked about him during draft season. Like, great prospect. One of arguably the best pure rusher in the class. Breece Hall, I think, had a more complete profile just from his receiving ability and his athleticism. But from a pure rushing standpoint, I mean, Ken Walker was kind of viewed as like, oh, this could be like the next Nick Chubb, who is obviously dominating in fantasy football this year. So Ken Walker in an offense that I'm much more excited about than I was during draft season in the Seattle Seahawks. Yeah, I'm taking Ken Walker.
Yes, I did notice that too. As the founder and president of the Chubb Club, I still continue to support my guy, Nick Chubb. Let's get to another trade offer here. James Robinson or Travis Etienne, and I'll throw in George Pickens. So what side of this deal you want to be in on here, Erickson?
I'm going to go with the Etienne and George Pickens side. I mean, how many more weeks are we just going to have to see Etienne outsnap Robinson before he's just ranked higher than James Robinson? Like, that could happen after this week.
I've got him almost back-to-back right now.
Yeah, so if that's going to end up happening anyway, and then you just like, oh yeah, you can take a really talented rookie wide receiver that has led his team in receiving yards the last 2 weeks with the new quarterback. I mean, you don't have to tie my hands to have me press the accept button on Etienne and George Pickens.
All right, Welsh, how about you? You got to go ahead and take the trend, the younger players here, or the guy who has proven it and just coming off 2 down games, maybe?
Next question. Yes, of course I'm going to do. I'm crazy.
Would you just do it for ATN straight up then? So
I might just do it for George Pickens straight up. I'm going to tell you. I think George Pickens is moving into a really, really great spot. The Pickett to Pickens thing is a great, great place. If you were kind of flush with some backs, if you own James Robinson, you probably are not pressed in a situation where he's a starter. And maybe you're also in a situation where you need a little bit more wide receivers. Obviously you could probably get a tiny bit more, but I might consider just doing this for Pickens straight up. And yeah, I would do this for Etienne straight up on either side. So this trade, however, this is going down on Sleeper. This is a no-brainer to me. Obviously, you can burn a little bit, but this is like the great trade because you've got 2 pieces to cover yourself if something goes wrong. Let's say James Robinson does end up getting more of a workload. Etienne gets hurt or just struggles a little bit more. Also getting Pickens in a move is just a little bit more insurance for you because Pickens is starting to look like a wide receiver 2 on a week in and week out basis. Pittsburgh is going to continuously be down. That looks like that is going to be something every single week. And they're going to be slinging the ball. And this isn't just Deontay Johnson's going to get his double-digit targets every week, but I think Pickens is on 2 straight weeks of 8 targets. And he is, he looks like one of the best pure wide receivers in the league right now. Yeah, and Pickett's not afraid to get him the ball.
Erickson, real quick, would you rather have Etienne or James Robinson rest of the season?
I would rather have Etienne.
Okay, there you go. I would make it 3 for 3 on this one, too. I think that's where the trend is going. This is your window to buy. Speaking of buying low, let's have Welsh pop in here with his favorite buy low RB of week 6. Who is it, Welsh?
Wouldn't you know this? It's Travis Etienne. That's
we'll
right.
Get out of town.
This is a shocker. Travis Etienne, some notes I got for you. Increased snap count 3 straight weeks. He's 15th in yards per attempt right now. Top 20 in tackles avoided. He's one of only 7 running backs with a 10+ yards per reception. Only Breece, Jamal, Kamara, and Corral are receivers that have more, or running backs that have more receiving yards per reception, and has a better ADOT, the 4th most red zone targets as far as receptions for a running back. I talked about Breece Hall being in that, and he's got a killer ADOT as far as depth of reception. I mean, I think Travis Etienne, we talked about actually like after week 1 and week 2, where he's being involved in the red zone a little bit more. He's made a couple boneheaded plays over the last 3 or 4 weeks, which I still hate to see, where it's just wide open drops. I think that's going to get fixed. And everything we've talked about, it's just moved right in. Give me Travis Etienne as my buy low right now, and I think we kind of set the stage for what it might look like.
All right, Erickson, who's your buy low RB for week 6 in the NFL?
I'm looking at Washington Commanders running back Brian Robinson. So he made his season debut last week. He had 9 carries for just 22 yards on a 29% snap share, but he still had more carries than Antonio Gibson. In his first game back, the fact that the team was willing to already put him out there and basically put Gibson in a reserved role. They're already hyping up Gibson for Thursday Night Football to return kicks.
I saw that. I was like, well, he's done.
Yeah, and I just don't think that people realize, what Brian Robinson could potentially offer you in your fantasy lineup if he is the goal line back for this team, specifically in this matchup against the Chicago Bears. Bears are the team that gives up the most and highest percentage of rushing touchdown to their opponents. Dalvin Cook, he couldn't score. He only played last week, the Chicago Bears, and that's why he scored 2 touchdowns. So with Brian Robinson, I think that his fantasy value could just spike if it's on a primetime game. Maybe people are watching. I know it's Thursday Night Football, but people are going to be watching. At least some people will be. He scores 1 or 2 touchdowns. Brian Robinson is going to shoot up in value, and then you can then make a decision based on how they do distribute touches later on. But the touchdowns, I think, is going to be key, and I think it's going to give Brian Robinson a spike in fantasy value.
On Sleeper, he's still available in 40% of leagues, if you can believe that, Brian Robinson.
Wow,
I don't know why.
really?
We did it yesterday. I couldn't believe it. Also, one more caveat. This is a great time to buy low in Dynasty on Antonio Gibson. He's going to be somewhere else next year, I'm telling you. And wherever he is, if they can figure out how to get him into the passing game, because, he was a wide receiver once upon a time, this is a great opportunity to get him for nothing. Get him for a 4th-round pick, 3rd-round pick, maybe.
His value is going to skyrocket this week when he makes that awesome special teams tackle on a punt return.
Yeah.
We're going to
very exciting times. All right, so those are the guys who want to buy. Who do you want to sell? Andrew Erickson, give me that name of that RB that you're selling off in week 6.
Yeah, so I'm looking at Dalvin Cook. I know I just mentioned him. I mentioned him scoring the 2 touchdowns against the Chicago Bears, but the thing I'm concerned about with Dalvin Cook is that he's starting to split touches a little bit more with Alexander Mattison. Now, last week, I saw Alexander Mattison kind of working a little bit more, but I figured it's Dalvin Cook's first game back. They're playing in London, the shoulder. Okay, he's going to be fine. But then this week, it was equally as bizarre. Alexander Mattison and Dalvin Cook tied in terms of routes run. Alexander Mattison had more targets, 4 versus Dalvin Cook's 2. And Alexander Mattison had a 43% snap share, which was his highest of the season. Dalvin Cook just played on 57% of the snaps. It wasn't just Alexander Mattison coming in to relieve Dalvin Cook. Alexander Mattison had drives to himself. Alexander Mattison was seeing touches inside the goal line in the red zone. So when Dalvin Cook is viewed by the name that, he's a top 5 running back, fantasy stud, nothing can touch him. But Alexander Mattison, his increased involvement over the last couple games has kind of shown me hey, Dalvin Cook might not be a top 6 running back and more like a back end RB1 rest of season, but I can sell him coming off the big game for a big profit. Someone I'm looking at is Dalvin Cook for Jamar Chase. Jamar Chase continues to disappoint. If I can get an elite wide receiver for Dalvin Cook, who, let's be honest, this guy gets banged up and he's still wearing a shoulder harness. So I think if I could sell him off for an elite wide receiver that I think has yet to really hit his peak production, I think that's the move I would try to make.
All right, Welsh, who's the guy that you're trying to kick to the curb this week and sell off?
I think I'm trying to move off of Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon has failed to get over 100 yards in all but 1 game this year. He's hasn't reached 100 yards rushing. You've got a little bit of an increase in Samaje Perine in the passing game as well. Some notes on Joe Mixon. Interestingly enough, as far as fantasy points per game goes, he's 16th scoring in half-point PPR for running backs right now. He's scoring 0.1 more than Jeffrey Wilson Jr., but he's scoring less than James Robinson, who we talked about, Dalvin Cook, Miles Sanders, a bunch of those guys. And as far as points per touch, he's 53rd in points per touch, which Najee Harris ranks higher. Yards per attempt, he's not inside the top 50, and 10th worst in the NFL for running backs as far as avoided tackles so far. This offense has also struggled quite a bit. Playing from behind is going to be more involved in the pass game, which Samaje Perine has gotten a little bit more of a role in. So I think there's still an opportunity because his name is still what it is. It's still floating around. People potentially thinking they're going to get great buy lows, that I would look to sell off Joe Mixon if given the opportunity.
Agreed. Some of those guys we talked about earlier, Pierce, Hall, Etienne, some sort of package of those guys or one of those guys. Plus, let me tell you, for Joe Mixon, it might be something worth kicking the tires on. All right. We always like to end things here with our 3 and out on our YouTube channel. So make sure that you are checking out, subscribing to our YouTube channel. And of course, these questions come straight from our Discord, fantasypros.com/chat, free to join. But again, when you go to fantasypros.com/offers and you upgrade to the 6 free premium months there, you get all the access to all this. So Welsh, I'll hit you with this first one, rapid fire style. This is from the Red Potato 777. What do y'all think about Gabe Davis for Ken Walker? What side of that deal you want to be on rest of the season?
Ooh, call me crazy. I think I might go with the Ken Walker side. I love what Gabe Davis did, but he still wasn't aggressively targeted. He had 2 huge plays, and I think there's 4 great receivers on that team. Ken Walker, as we talked about, as far as running backs go, give me Ken Walker.
I have to agree. I'll take the volume guy as much as I am the Gabe Davis dude from day one. Like, it is a little more sporadic. Fleur de Lis OG. What range of RBs would you trade for Dameon Pierce? Aaron Jones range or still lower than that? Andrew, what do you think?
No, I think that Aaron Jones range is kind of like the perfect place to target. I think Aaron Jones is the perfect guy to trade away. I mean, Aaron Jones has been just like they're in the committee in an offense that, let's be honest, like has been disappointing. Like, we're not trying to jam in pieces of this Packers offense. They've had ample opportunities to run over teams, the Patriots, the Giants. You're expecting positive game scripts for Dylan and Aaron Jones, and what are we left with? Just like, performances. So Aaron Jones, I think, still has that name brand that, yeah, I'll trade Aaron Jones for this. I'll take Dameon Pierce for Aaron Jones. Yeah, Aaron Jones is a stud. It's like, I mean, he really hasn't been a stud this year.
Yeah. All right, last one here, and this is obviously someone who got kicked off the Rings of Power, that new Lord of the Rings series. This is from Hobo Fraggins. Hobo Fraggins wants to know J.K. Dobbins and Scary Terry for Dameon Pierce and Rashad Bateman. Welsh, which side of this deal do you want to be on?
Give me Pierce and Bateman. I'll take the best running back in the deal, and I maybe might make an argument that I'll take the best wide receiver in the deal as well. So give me Bateman and give me Dameon Pierce. Pretty easy for me.
Just got to get him healthy. All right, that'll do it for us. But the story of the game goes on. For the Welsh and Andrew Erickson, I'm Joey P. We'll see you next time, kids.
Thanks for tuning in to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. Don't forget to check out our featured videos. And while you're at it, make sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Fantasy Pros, so you can get the latest news and updates to give you the edge you need in your fantasy league.